Our Migratory Bird Center was founded in the 1990s, but the work for migratory bird conservation kind of started long before that. And in the 1980s, the person who then went on to kind of be the founder of the Migratory Bird Center, Dr. Russell Greenberg, he was noticing a decline in migratory songbird populations in North America. So if you think about, 40 years ago, we're in the 80s, and he's noticing and trying to figure out sort of like, where are these birds going? I know they're here in North America during part of the year, and then they disappear, and then sometimes they come back and sometimes they don't. And we're starting to see fewer and fewer of these birds. So he kind of said, all right, I'm going to try to figure out where it is that these birds are going. He went down to Mexico to conduct a bit of research there and to try to see if he could find those same birds and figure out where it was that they were going when they left our areas in North America here. What he kind of found while he was down there was that there were lots and lots of birds in undisturbed forest. And he's looking around, he's trying to figure out, okay, what are the types of habitat that they're utilizing? He was on one area of a valley and heard a lot of bird calls and things like that happening. And he looked over and it looked like an area that appeared to be sort of like an undisturbed forest. Went over to check it out, and what he realized is that it was a coffee farm. So there was coffee growing in the understory, and then lots of native trees providing high shade for birds, really high quality habitat, and lots of this this area that effectively looked like a forest but was actually a coffee farm. And he said, this seems like this could be a really important habitat measure for migratory birds and providing a healthy overwintering habitat for them. And so that kind of led to just this concept that coffee could be grown in a way that was friendly to birds and biodiversity. And that sort of went on to become the Smithsonian Bird Friendly Certification Program.
This is just such a serendipitous story, right? And I think probably the biggest shock to Dr. Greenberg was thinking he's looking at what we're saying, like pristine, untouched, old growth forest, going in and actually seeing like, oh, this is a farm. Who knew a farm could look like this? Because certainly in North America, we at that time didn't have those examples. Many of us in the West are quite detached from the things we consume. Can you help me understand, what does coffee look like? Like, it's apparently not a tree. How does coffee grow, and how can that fit into a forest ecosystem?
So coffee is kind of like a shrub. When it's ripe, it's these nice, beautiful, bright red cherries that kind of grow out on the coffee shrub itself. And the shrubs, they can get to be quite tall. And so they can grow in the understory. So coffee is a unique crop in that it is perfectly happy to grow under the shade of trees. And that's actually how it was originally grown. And it was only actually up until the 1970s that most coffee was grown that way. And then around the 70s, that's when we saw the conversion of a lot of coffee farm from this agroforestry, where there's the agriculture kind of in the understory of the forest above, to the removal of a lot of the trees and a lot of the kind of the native plants and things like that are in there to grow coffee in the sun instead. And there are a number of different reasons why that change kind of happened. There's rising number of people who are drinking coffee, and the governments are kind of saying, hey, we want to make sure that we can keep up with this demand. And there was this idea that if you eliminated some of the shade trees, that you could, in theory, grow more coffee in that way, that the cherries would ripen faster, and that would be a higher yield for the producers there. There ended up being a big conversion of the way that coffee was grown from the agroforests, how it originally grew, into just this kind of clear-cut monoculture where the coffee is just kind of baking in the sun, and you're just seeing rows and rows of crops and very little space for birds and biodiversity to coexist in that way.
So we have a scientist who traveled down with a team and discovered, okay, there is habitat fragmentation and habitat loss, but it looks like there's also solutions at the same time. And then what stemmed from there?
What we ended up kind of seeing was, when Dr. Greenberg came back and was trying to figure out, what do we do with this information that we now have? So we have made this association that the agroforests can provide really high quality habitat for birds and biodiversity. The question then became, how do we incentivize producers to grow their coffee in this way? So for those remaining folks that have kept this high quality habitat on their land, how can we make it so that they feel there's a reason for them to continue growing coffee in this way? How do we incentivize that?
And let me interrupt you here just for me to get a sense. Tell me a little bit about the economics of this. Is it somehow cheaper to do the monoculture where it's just coffee? Is it somehow more expensive for landowners to continue with the polyculture? Why would someone choose one over the other?
So for each individual farmer, there can be, or landowner or producer, there's different motivating factors, and it kind of boils down to how you want to sell your coffee. So there's coffee that can be sold as specialty grade, and that's when we think about high quality, high end specialty coffees versus your commodity coffee, which I kind of refer to as your gas station coffee, where it's just a mix of a bunch of beans and we're not really sure where it's coming from, and maybe the quality is a bit lower. So there's a lot of different factors that can go into how a producer can sell their coffee and how much money they can get for it. So that was kind of what led to the creation of the Bird Friendly program, was trying to find a way to provide this incentive for producers that they could get more money for their coffee, and Smithsonian will prove, we will vouch for them that yes, this coffee is grown in a way that's really good for birds.